So I think now we're going to don't forget to use the QR code, put some questions for me, but now we're going to hear from the people who make it happen in action, in real, and that is often the real challenge. We have a mental image of how work is, and then there's the work as real. And what we're going to be hearing from Lachlan about is what it's really like and what real workplaces have done to generate it. And then Dylan's going to come up, and then Sally, and then we'll all come together again for discussion. So I'm going to hand over now to Lachlan. Thanks, Lachlan.
Hello. I've just got to work out how to work this button before I go any further. Let's try that. That's backwards. The big green button would be forwards, that makes sense. I'd first just like to acknowledge that we're on Whadjuk Noongar Budja and pay respects to Aboriginal elders past and present. And in the spirit of truth-telling, acknowledge that this land was not ceded and the impacts of colonisation are ongoing and real for Aboriginal people. And I think in the context of psychosocial safety in the workplace, just also want to acknowledge the importance of cultural security and cultural safety in the workplace as well. I'm a little bit nervous. I do also talk fast when I present, so I just want to acknowledge that I will try and slow myself down as much as possible. But that may or may not happen, so bear with me. So I'm Lachie Denning. I'm the youth practice consultant with Anglicare WA. I'm a youth worker by trade, so I'm not a WHS specialist at all. I come from the front line of youth work. I was also in a previous role. So previously I was in a role with Anglicare WA as a mental health project manager. And so in that role, I did some work around a range of things, but including looking at workforce wellbeing across the organisation. And that's really what I'm here to share with you about today. So what we'll chat about is, I'll just give a bit of context about who Anglicare WA is so that you understand the context of the work that we're in. I'll talk about why we wanted to do something around psychosocial hazards, and then also what we did and how we did it, and then the learnings that came from that. And while I think for those of you in the room who aren't in community services, which I think will probably be most of you, I think what's important is less the content of what we did and more what I really want to highlight is the pathway of how we got to where we did, because that part is generalisable. That part, I think the method we use is you can pick that up and run with it and apply it in any setting, as long as Peter said, you're applying something that's fit for purpose for the type of work that your organisation does. So Anglicare WA is an incorporated not-for-profit organisation with more than 700 staff dedicated to serving Western Australian individuals, families and communities. We aim to drive positive outcomes with those in need and to challenge barriers to thriving. In 2024, we reached 102,981 people across 101 programs, over 201 locations from Kununurra in the north to Albany in the south, so really across most of WA. Our programs include financial inclusion, family law services, family domestic violence services, youth homelessness, family and children, mental health and disability, as well as a range of other things as well. So I guess even though we're in community services, the type of work that people do is also very broad and wide-ranging. I'm just going to check my notes, make sure there wasn't anything else I was going to add at this point. I think the important... Yeah, I'll just skip along. We'll go to the next slide. So I guess emotional demands are really the main psychosocial hazard that our workforce people face. So we have people doing child sexual abuse counselling, suicide post-intervention and bereavement counselling. We've got residential youth workers who are on the floor of a crisis accommodation service 24/7, supporting young people who are incredibly vulnerable. We have lone staff travelling from town to town in the Pilbara to provide youth mental health services, and even our service access team who are just across the river in our East Perth head office, who act as our first port of call for pretty much all of the referrals and the incoming people. You know, when people reach out and want to call Anglicare WA, these are the people that pick up the phone, and they're hearing a range of different stories and people in a lot of need. So I guess that just is really to give you a context of the type of work that we're doing and the emotional demand that comes with that. So we have things like EAP, our staff have one-to-one supervision, all those sort of bare minimum things that we have to do, we're already doing. However, over the last few years, we've been seeing more and more people presenting to our services with, that's not the right one, stay on this one. So I guess we've been seeing more and more people present with increasing complexity. So as the financial cost of living crisis increases, so does vulnerability. The housing crisis is significantly impacting those most vulnerable in WA, mental health, drug and alcohol issues, these are all increasing significantly over the last 5 years or so, as well as a shocking increase in the presence of family, domestic violence, intimate partner violence and coercive control. So I guess that's just setting the scene. The content of the work that our people do, the stories they hear are increasingly challenging, and that emotional demand is really important. Not just that, but also there's some system level issues, and I think, as Peter pointed out, it's not just the content of the work people do, but what are your organisational structures and what are the system level kind of pressures that impact the wellbeing of staff. So, for example, 5 to 10 years ago, if a young person was rough sleeping on the streets, you could support them into crisis accommodation that day or the next day. But now, every night there's 75 young people aged 15 to 25 who are homeless and rough sleeping, and there are 1.2 beds available every night in crisis accommodation. So the challenges that our people are facing, once upon a time, the work we did was offering a lot of solutions, and now our staff are really holding distress and holding complexity for a lot longer, and often with limited capacity to provide solution for people. So that's sort of just the context of the work that we're doing. The work is harder. So in 2022, our board and our executive decided, as a part of our strategic plan, that there was a strategic initiative to build mental health support capacity across the organisation, and the role I was in was really leading that initiative from a project management perspective. A component of that included a focus on amplifying the wellbeing of our people. So that's really why we decided to do something different about the supporting psychosocial safety in the organisation, really with the focus of the work is tough, how can we really amplify the wellbeing and do the best that we can as much as possible. So what do we do and how? So instead of just charging ahead with some yoga in the park, although I think that's still important, has a place, we decided to really zoom out and look at a whole of organisation strategic approach to wellbeing, specific to the type of organisation that we are. So we made a strategy and action plan. When I say we, it's really important to acknowledge this was a piece of work done by a lot of people. So first, with a home in our internal Well at Work working group, which is made up of over 20 staff from across the organisation who voluntarily joined this working group to contribute to the wellbeing of staff across the organisation. And then closely also with our people and culture team and a range of other stakeholders who were really, I think, the people who can decide on allocating work and getting things done. So to do that, we started with the Thrive at Work framework. So I just really want to acknowledge Curtin University's Future of Work Institute. I'm not sure if anyone is here from there, but these guys have created this Thrive at Work framework, which is absolutely amazing. It's really an evidence-based best practice framework that provides a guide on all the things, everything that contributes to the wellbeing in an organisational setting across 3 key pillars. So you can see there's mitigate illness, which is, I think, the thing from a WHS perspective, often that's the first focus, that's the priority. But also, really importantly, it expands into how can we prevent harm and how can we promote thriving as well. So there's the 3 pillars, but then there's a range of building blocks, and then I think it's 27 key strategies. Check out their website. I think there's a link in my notes here. I'm not sure if I'm going to share those, but Google it. It's pretty easy to find. They really drill down across these key strategies into what could that look like in an organisation. It's very applicable across a range of sectors. It's not specific to community services at all. So it really drills down, and if you can put your own lens over that, that would be probably the key takeaway from my perspective. they kind of hold your hand along the way for that, I guess, that root analysis kind of component for looking at the impacts of work on psychosocial wellbeing. So check that out. So we really started with that as our foundation. We then did some, I guess what I'm trying to articulate here is that there was very much a bottom-down approach of like, this is a priority, we need to make sure we're doing something about it. My role sat, I think really importantly, not in our corporate services, but within our service delivery sort of arm of the organisation. So then I'm knocking this thing. That gave me the capacity to sort of walk between the areas of an organisation, because any of you who are from large organisations, there's at some area, some level, that's where there's a gap between the frontline hard work that people are doing and the top. There's always a gap of some kind, and for us that exists at the sort of service delivery level, and I think it's really important to acknowledge. And then the task is, how do we bridge that and walk that properly so that everyone within an organisation can contribute to this. And so I started with, we started with qualitative consultation with service leaders and frontline staff. So that was really going to, I guess, the gatekeepers of the organisation, if that makes sense. And really just listening, really without much of an agenda, just wanting to hear what's impacting you, what does wellbeing mean to you in work, and then be able to sort of pull some themes together as a place to start. Also, please, someone just give me like a 2-minute warning when you want me to wind up. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. So that was a sort of a place to start, and that really gave us I think the deep listening part was really important here, and dedicating time to do that rather than trying to race through. Because there were some really key gaps that were identified very early that became a core part of our plan. The next step was to do a Thrive at Work audit. Again, the Thrive at Work team have an auditing tool which is incredibly useful. It helps you map across all of those key strategies what are we already doing that contributes to psychosocial wellbeing. And what was really surprising, I think by the end of that we had about 250 different items or different things, different programs, policies, a range of things that we're doing either ad hoc, systematically, or sometimes it's somewhere in between that. To support psychosocial wellbeing, and really highlighted how broad those things can be. It's not just specific niche things, but there's a lot of things that contribute, and that really was a clear way to provide us with that understanding. So through that process, we were able to see what we already do, and also assess a bit of the maturity of each of those things as well. What it doesn't do for you is tell you where the gaps are. That's where we have to come in and think that through. So that's why we went through this through a double diamond co-design process with our Well at Work group, who really represent a staff across the organisation, and then our other key stakeholders and decision makers. And through that process, we're really able to identify some root cause for some of the challenges that we were seeing, some idea, just brains, that the beauty of the double diamond approach is you can just go wild and come up with all sorts of solutions, good and bad, but then really refining that down to the things that would actually be achievable and would fit into what we were trying to do. So, and as it says up there, all the stakeholders and doers, as much as possible, are part of this process from as early on as possible. That meant that we didn't create something that worked in silo, but was across everybody, across the organisation. So this thing's not pretty, but this was the thing that worked. This was just a useful way to articulate the plan. So what we ended up with was 26 actions across 6 outcome themes, which I didn't include that in the slide, but which sort of, when measured against the Thrive framework, kind of just had there was a web just going across the thing, so we could sort of see, okay, these are the outcomes we want to achieve, and this is how it sort of matches against the Thrive at Work framework, so we can really see, are we hitting things that we want to hit? Are there any gaps? And then, yeah. So I guess really importantly, the ownership or responsibility for these actions sat across a range of teams. It wasn't just with one person, it wasn't just with one team. It sat, most of them probably sat with our people and culture team, to be honest, but also our Well at Work group held a range of them, and a range of our other internal teams were held and were responsible for some of those actions. And they were on board with that and agreeing to that before it went to executive for endorsement and approval. So we weren't throwing them work that they never knew about or didn't agree to. And then my role, and alongside the Well at Work group, was to support the project management of that. So I led some of these projects, other people led others, but I held the sort of project management component. And I think that's one thing that's really important to take away is without that, you can't really, thanks. I'm being told to wrap it up. So that's kind of the journey of the thing that we made. I'm just going to show you a couple of things that we did. So we had, our first action was around mental health promotion and team wellbeing grants. So our Well at Work group, which are voluntary, they're volunteering their time into this. They led that. They created a strategy, and we had this widespread mental health promotion. Things like Are You OK Days, stuff like that was kind of already happening, but in a really sort of ad hoc way, and that was pulled together in a really strategic approach. We had dedicated team wellbeing grants for teams so that they could come up with their own. I made a joke about yoga in the park. One team did yoga online. That was their team wellbeing grant that they came up with. That was what they wanted. That was for them. That was not us going, hey, everyone's going to do yoga now, because some people are going to not be interested in that. But this team decided they're spread across the state. They wanted to do that online, which is really interesting, I think. Our people and culture team developed some wellbeing action plans, and these are really for individual staff to do themselves. They can involve their leader if they want to, and there was sort of a leadership training or leadership guidance kind of approach to that as well. From a systematic perspective, we reviewed our tender and implementation process. So the work we do comes usually from state government, federal government contracts. If we're going for a tender and we're successful, that means more people. That means a new team. And often the consideration around facilities, do we have the space for them? Pushed to the side until we get the thing, and they're like, okay, I guess we have to work that out later. So that conversation, that discussion has been brought to the front now, so that those considerations can be part of that. Do we actually have space, or we're going to cram a whole bunch of people together, which obviously impacts wellbeing. And then we did another piece around exploring ways to address the specific challenges of high emotional demand roles. So these actions were spread across the organisation, but we do have some roles that have incredibly high emotional demand, and this was really an exploratory project where we went and spoke with some people doing those really pointy end roles to really deeply understand and dedicate some time to those individuals, and that resulted in 7 key insights and 14 recommendations that were made to executive in addition, beyond this, which have now, some of those have been translated into the next iteration of this plan as well. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. Key learnings, I think, I've tried to touch on these as we went. Consultant-involved staff, so we need that bottom-up approach, really, really important. Key stakeholders and decision-makers need to be involved. Listen deeply, which takes time. The plan, I think one of the successes of it was there was tangible and visible actions, as well as structural changes that are kind of can be a bit invisible as well. And then the last one is the Thrive at Work framework. Makes it easy, it holds your hand. Please come and chat to me afterwards if you want to chat more about that. I also just want to acknowledge the work that I did spend some time with DFES before I came to Anglicare WA, and they have also used the Thrive at Work framework. I'm not sure if anyone from DFES is here, but I think the reason I mentioned that is because they've done incredible work with that as well, and I think it shows that it's a vastly different organisation, vastly different work, still very much a high emotional demand for components of that work, but this Thrive at Work framework absolutely works as a pathway to support you in creating your own strategy and action plan around psychosocial wellbeing. And that's me, thank you. All right, so shall I hand over to Dylan? Yeah, all right.